Do you buy into the argument that the voice of business, and especially small business, doesn't have enough representation in Washington?
Depends on what you mean by the voice of business and the voice of small business. If what the question presupposes is that you have to have a very specific type of business background, then I disagree with you. Now, my opponent likes to characterize this race as one between a businessman and a lawyer. I think that's an overly simplistic characterization. That is an overly simplistic way to analyze a candidate. In other words, there are good businessmen and there are bad businessmen. There are good lawyers and there are bad lawyers. There are lots and lots of lawyers that I would never trust with my government. There are lots of lawyers I can think of and lots of businessmen I can think of. Probably most in both categories that I would never trust with the reins of government. But there are a few in both categories that I would. But whether or not I'm going to trust someone running the government has very little to do with what their academic pedigree is, with what degrees they hold. It has far more to do with what they've done with that degree, or what they've done with that business background, or law background, or medical background, or whatever it is. Yeah. In one way or another, most of us are businessmen. In one way or another, I'm a businessman. I just have a very specialized type of business. My business involves getting government, at least in many instances, it involves putting government back in its place according to what the Constitution requires. I just provide a very specialized service in my business, but I am a businessman. So
yeah, and I guess what I'm getting at too in the question is it seems like you start to look too much behind the lobbying industry in general. You see a lot of money coming from businesses, big businesses, small businesses. And I took my class from Sandy Botkin to teach me how to file my own business or how to properly track my accounting for my own business. And he starts off by saying there's two tax codes in America. One tax code for those of us who work for a wage and make a salary, and another tax code for those of us who own businesses and LLCs and S corps. And he says this tax code has been designed by people who understand that small businesses are the engine of the American economy, and this tax code is designed to give massive tax breaks and benefits to people that know how to properly use and run an LLC to take advantage of this massive tax code that you've been critical of. And I look at this and say, you look at the tax code that we file, and it seems like the businesses had plenty of say in Washington. I just don't buy the argument that it seems like that businesses is underrepresented. I mean, maybe with the government we have now, the Obama administration, you see businesses being thrown under the bus in favor of organized labor and government employment, but I don't. Historically, I don't see that American businesses have been underrepresented in Congress. And you can respond to that if you want to or not. But
yeah, yeah, I would just add to it maybe. It's not that businessmen or businesses generally are underrepresented. It's that they're doing stupid things, doing things that aren't constitutional. It's that they're exceeding their authority. So what we need back there is someone, whether their background is in business or law or medicine or agriculture or whatever, someone who understands and is willing to stick to the plan that says we're going to limit government, we're going to rein it in, we're going to get the government doing only what government is supposed to do. Sometimes when you send a businessman back there, the businessman is used to a mindset that expanding is always better. Because in business, generally that's true. You want to expand. You expand, that means you're doing well. When we expand government, we contract business. Sometimes that's been hard for some businessmen serving in Washington to understand.
Fair enough, and I agree with that. I've also said in other things I've written that my business was largely founded on the fact that I have good legal contracts written, good rules that were written by lawyers. That, and I mean, most businessmen, behind every successful businessman, there's probably a good lawyer writing the rules for how he's succeeding. And it seems like a senator is more like a rule maker than a businessman. But when the founders wrote the Constitution, they envisioned a smaller role in international affairs than America currently enjoys. After World War II, America's role in the world was dramatically changed, and the collapse of the Soviet Union only increased the stature of America's role in world affairs. And so what are America's priorities when it comes to international affairs?
Thomas Jefferson had a quote, I may not have it exactly right, but it was to the effect that America, its foreign affairs, should be friendly to all nations, but entangled with none. Meaning, we ought to maintain good relationships with every country out there. We ought not have these entanglement alliances that tie us into going to war anytime one ally gets into trouble. It's easier said than done. I know it really isn't an isolationist policy, but it is a policy that says our efforts in the area of foreign affairs and military affairs always needs to be focused on protecting Americans. That's what our focus ought to be. We need to not lose focus by saying we have to make the world safe for democracy or just making the world a better place. Making the world a better place is a great thing. It's something that all of us aspire to do or should aspire to do. That doesn't mean it's the role of our federal government to do it.
Fair enough. Like I was reading a book by George Friedman. He says that America currently enjoys the power and the freedom and the wealth that we do because of the international position that we hold. It says America's Navy controls all the sea lanes in the world. The floating weight of our Navy outweighs the combined weight of every other Navy on the planet combined. And when you have that kind of power, whenever you act internationally, you impact somebody. And so I guess the question is that America, whether we want it or not,
the shipping lanes, I agree with that.
We control that. We control international trade. That's the world order that we live in. And if that's the case, this is a very different world than Thomas Jefferson's world.
Yeah.
And so at that point, what are our interests? At what point do we say America's international interests are being jeopardized? We need to protect them.
I don't think that the statement that you paraphrased for me was necessarily inconsistent with what Jefferson was saying. What he was saying had far more to do with America's involvement in the internal affairs of another country or in another country's foreign affairs with other countries. What you're talking about is our military and maritime supremacy, which I believe we should maintain, do everything necessary to maintain, because America's interests are such that we benefit every time there is a fair, even playing field, meaning anytime commerce can move effectively from one part of the world to another, American businesses will benefit because American businesses do well in producing things as long as there's a fair, even playing field in which everyone can get their goods from one place to another.